You know, restoring a tooth after a root canal, it's got to be one of the biggest challenges we face in dentistry. These teeth are definitely weakened, and the stakes are just incredibly high. One wrong move, and that tooth could be lost forever. But with the right approach, you can save it for years and years. So today, we're going to cut through all the old myths and give you a really clear, evidence-based guide to nailing it every time. So, let's kick things off with the most fundamental question of all. Why do these teeth actually break? I mean, what's really going on? For years, we were all told the same story, right? That they get brittle, that they dry out because they lost their blood supply. Well, it turns out modern research tells a completely different story. The real truth isn't biological. Nope, it's structural.
And here it is. Here's the real culprit, laid out plain as day in the data. It's the sheer volume of tooth tissue that's gone. I mean, look at this. A simple axis opening, that barely makes a dent, only a 5% drop in stiffness. But the moment you lose those marginal ridges, the key structural pillars of the tooth, the stiffness just falls off a cliff, a staggering 63% drop. So it's not that the tooth is brittle, it's that it has been hollowed out.
Okay, so if the big problem is a loss of structural integrity, then the solution has to be reinforcing whatever's left, right? And that brings us to what is, without a doubt, the single most important concept in restoring these teeth, the ferrule effect. Seriously, this is the bedrock for every single decision that comes next. So what is a ferrule, exactly? The easiest way to think of it is as a 360-degree collar of healthy, natural tooth that the crown can literally grip onto. And let me be clear, these dimensions are non-negotiable. For a ferrule to actually work, you need at least 1 millimeter of thickness and ideally a continuous 1 to 2 millimeters of height.
And the best way to understand what it does is with this analogy. Picture the steel bands on an old wooden barrel. Those bands are what hold all the wooden slats together under pressure. Well, the ferrule does the exact same thing for a tooth. It's a brace that fights against chewing forces and dramatically reduces the risk of the whole thing splitting apart.
With the ferrule as our guiding principle, our North Star, we can now tackle the first huge clinical decision we have to make. Do we need to put a post in the canal? And the answer to this question is almost entirely dictated by one thing: whether or not you have a good ferrule.
So here's a simple little cheat sheet for that decision. If you have that solid 1 to 2 millimeter ferrule, the evidence is crystal clear: a post is unnecessary. The ferrule itself is providing all the fracture resistance you need. Now, if there's no ferrule, things get a little more specific. For front teeth and premolars, a post is recommended to help retain the core buildup. But, and this is a big but, look at the molars. Even with no ferrule, a post is just not justified. Why? Because that big, wide pulp chamber floor gives you more than enough surface area to bond a core securely. You just don't need it.
Now, let's say a post is needed. Well, your material choice is everything. The old-school cast metal post is just way too rigid. It acts like a wedge, concentrating all the stress at the tip and leading to those awful catastrophic root fractures that you just can't fix. A modern glass fiber post, on the other hand, is a total game changer. Its flexibility, its elastic modulus, is really similar to dentin. That means it flexes with the tooth, spreading out the stress. And the best part? Even if it fails, it's usually a favorable, repairable failure, not a total loss of the tooth.
Okay, so our foundation is set, we've decided on the whole post situation, and now it's time to choose the final restoration. This is the armor that's going to protect everything we've built underneath.
You know, the most conservative option is very often the best one. For back teeth, where you still have a good amount of tooth structure left, a partial crown, an onlay or an overlay is an excellent choice. The key is to use materials you can bond, like lithium disilicate. But here's a really interesting tidbit. Research suggests you should avoid zirconia for these partials. It's so incredibly rigid that it can actually lead to a catastrophic fracture of the tooth underneath. Of course, the full crown is still a proven, highly successful option for a lot of heavily damaged teeth. And here's the modern twist on that. While we tend to think of full crowns as being less conservative, materials like monolithic zirconia are so strong that they actually allow for a much more minimal preparation. This means we can get that full coverage and protection while still sticking to our core philosophy of saving as much of that precious tooth structure as possible. Next up is a really clever solution, the endocrown. This is basically a one-piece restoration. It's part core, part crown, all in one, and it anchors directly inside the pulp chamber. But, and I really have to stress this, the indication here is extremely specific, molars only. They're the only teeth with a big enough chamber to get enough retention. If you try this on an incisor or a premolar, the failure rates just skyrocket. And once again, material is key. Lithium disilicate is the go-to. Zirconia has been linked to the highest rate of catastrophic failures for this specific design.
We've mentioned materials all throughout this, but they are so crucial to this modern approach that they really deserve their own spotlight. The reality is these strategies are only possible because the building blocks themselves have gotten so much smarter.
So when you're building up the core of the tooth, the top recommendation today is a short fiber reinforced composite, or SFRC. The analogy is perfect. It's just like putting rebar into concrete. The tiny fibers inside the composite act like crack stoppers. When a microcrack tries to form and spread, it runs right into a fiber, which either stops it cold or deviates it completely. The result? You get a much higher fracture resistance than with the conventional composite.
And get this, even the fiber post itself has evolved. The latest development is the bundled glass fiber post. Instead of one single rigid post, imagine a collection of fine fibers that are bonded directly into the canal just as it is. What's the number one advantage? It's huge. You don't need to drill to create a post space. You're not removing any more of that precious dentin. It is the ultimate expression of minimally invasive dentistry, preserving the absolute maximum amount of the tooth.
So we've covered the problem, the principles, the big decisions, and all these amazing materials. Let's just pull it all together into one clear guiding philosophy.
It really all boils down to these 4 principles. 1. Preserve tooth structure above all else. Tissue loss is the real enemy. 2. The ferrule is king. It dictates your entire plan of attack. 3. Mimic dentin. Use materials that flex and behave like a natural tooth so they can distribute stress safely. And 4. Be minimally invasive in every single step you take, from the prep all the way to the post.
And this brings us to a final, kind of provocative thought. After all this incredible technology and material science, this whole evidence-based philosophy seems to point to one simple conclusion. True mastery isn't really about how much stuff we can add back to a tooth, but how much of the original structure we can be intelligent enough to preserve. Maybe, just maybe, the best dentistry really is the least dentistry.